What up, party people? Here we are again with another edition of DJ to DJ. And of course, I'm your man, DJ Fernando G, as always, with another amazing talent ready to tell us their story. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the one and only DJ Icy Ice. What up, brother? How are you?
Hey, what's up, my man? Fernando G, appreciate you for having me on your show, man. This is dope.
It is my pleasure, man. I've been following you for a little while now and checking you out. And I said, well, this is one man I definitely got to have on. You got a huge history behind you, man.
Yeah, I've been around for a while. So I've been DJing quite a few years. So yeah, man, it's been a fun ride.
That's good. That's good. So
and it's still a fun ride, even all the way through this time.
Right? Right? It's been madness recently, but the cool thing is that, you know, we can still be creative and have some fun. So what do you say we get right into it? As always, we flash back and we go back to the origins of when little DJ Icy Ice discovered turntables and discovered the art of DJing. So what do you say you take us back to that moment when you first found out about DJing?
Man, well, I grew up in Carson, California. Suburb in LA, which sits right between Long Beach and Long Beach and Compton. Mm-hmm. And in Carson, I grew up around just the hip hop culture. The hip hop culture was very rich in my city. And it was all minorities. We were all in a city of minorities, so Latinos, African Americans, and then Filipinos, and just Pacific Islanders like Samoans, big population of Samoans. So just the culture of hip hop was rich in our city. So B-boys, you know, MCs, graffiti artists, and a whole bunch of DJs just came from my city and just represented. So I grew up in that kind of city and that kind of environment, and it was amazing. And you know, to give you an idea, like in my middle school dances, my junior high, like the first dances I attended, man, it was like the K-Day Mixmasters, Joe Cooley, DJing at my dances, the Knights of the Turntable, who had an actual record back at the time.
Right.
Like those type of caliber of DJs were DJing at my school dances. So
that is cool.
Growing up in that type of city, growing up in that type of environment and that type of surrounding, and then going to dances, and those were the type of DJs I was watching, I got hooked. I had to become a DJ myself. But yeah, the time I saw Joe Cooley cut it up at my school, that's when I knew. I was like, man, I gotta be a DJ.
Was he doing the behind the back scratching and all that stuff, doing all the crazy stuff?
Everything. So there's like a video of him circulating on YouTube. It was him at a school called Banning. Banning is one of the high schools that my school filtered into. So my junior high filtered into Banning or Carson High. I, of course, went to Carson High, but Joe Cooley DJ'd at Banning High School. And then, yes, a lot of those same things that you see in that video, he was doing that at my school dance. So, yeah, around the back, cutting, scratching. Of course, they had the ticker, you know, like the little click on the new marks, and he would just cut it up. But, yeah, he was doing Torty Friends, It's Time, Clear, like, you know, just all the records that you would hear a DJ cut up back in the day. He was doing all those routines and some at my school dance.
That is awesome. Yeah, I went to high school with Richard Vision, and Richard was the dance commissioner at Franklin High School, and he brought him over for one of the dances, and we were just all blown away because he was doing the It Takes Two, and I mean, under the leg, behind the back, and it was just like, what the heck? And it was just amazing, the turntablism. I mean, just everything that he did was just blew you away.
Yeah, so it's crazy, like how you're talking about that. And I think it's hard for people to even imagine or kind of even visualize that. But yeah, the type of things he was doing in that day and age at that time is just way far in advance what was out at the moment. You know, like had Jazzy Jeff and Cash Money and the guys on the East Coast doing their thing. And then on the West Coast, Joe Cooley, the K-Day Mixmasters, all of those guys were representing. And so that was a huge influence in my life, seeing that. And then always tuning in on 1580 K-Day and hearing Tony G, Julio G, Hamburger Helper, Ralph M, all those K-Day Mixmasters killing it on the radio on a weekly basis. So I would sit up, pop in my cassette, record those mixes, and then just kind of emulate them when I finally did get some equipment. So that was my early beginnings.
So let's get into that. What was your first setup like when you first were able to get your turntables and mixer and stuff?
Well, so I never got my own first setup on my own. I had to work and put in some work and do a lot of different things for my dad, and go with him to go clean out old apartments and things like that,
Yep.
just to earn enough money to buy one turntable.
Yep.
And then my homie also wanted to get in DJing, so he did the same thing with his pops. He'd go mow lawns and help them with their gardening business and all that stuff to save up for the other turntable. And then my other homie down the street, all three of us lived in the same neighborhood, a few houses from each other, and we all saved up different pieces. We all saved up for different pieces of equipment so then we can make one set. We were all broke. We were all
That's
poor
cool.
to own our own system. So we all combined, and we all saved up to have an equipment set because the three of us combined it all together.
That's
And then
cool,
it would stay
man.
at one person's house, then it would go over to this person's house, and then it'd come over to my house, and I hogged it up the most, man. I made sure it didn't leave my house that often.
So they'd be all
I made
pissed off,
sure,
like, "Hey,
like,
dude, we
whenever
need
the
it
equipment
back."
made it to my house, it stayed at my house the longest.
Well, it seems to have paid off that you hog those things, man, because you are seriously talented, man. I've been listening to your mixes and watching you for a little while, and it's like,
Oh,
you
appreciate
know
it,
your
bro.
stuff, man. There's a reason why they call you Icy, man, because you definitely cut it up really clean, man.
Oh, appreciate that, bro.
How did you come up with that name? How did you come up with your DJ name?
So my real name is Isaiah, and
Mm.
everyone was just naturally call me Ice for my nickname. So Ice for short, Isaiah. And then back in that time, uh, this is late 80s, early 90s, it was very common to double up your name.
Yep.
So yeah, man, like I was originally thinking of calling myself Icy I, as in Icy Isaiah.
Mm.
And one of my homegirls in that class, she turned around and just told me, she sat in front of me and she told me, "Why don't you call yourself Icy Ice? Just double up your name." I'm like, oh, I was a little hesitant, but I liked the ring of it, and I knew it was common, double up your name, so I went with it. I knew that there was also a break dancer in New York called Icy Ice, and he, like way before my time, was just killing it on the breakdancing tip. But yeah, I became DJ Icy Ice, and I took on that name, and I've been it ever since.
That's real cool. And do you recall what your first big event was?
All right, my first big event, I would say my very first big event was that my junior high dance, the same stage where I saw Joe Cooley, the Mixmasters, the Knights of the Turntable, all those guys performing. I finally got to play that within a year's time of getting the turntables set with my friends. And then we had to have older brothers and older friends drive our equipment over to the place, borrow some speakers from other DJ crews just to be able to do that party. But yes, my first big gig that I did was at that actual junior high dance, where I was able to get inspired by Joe Cooley. Then I was on that stage performing for my school, and that was a surreal experience
How
because
cool is that?
just a few months earlier, I'm looking up at Joe Cooley. Now I'm in Joe Cooley's place, and I'm looking down on the school and DJing for everybody. So that was a surreal experience.
I mean I mean, when you do that like for the first time, it's such a rush, you know. I mean, I remember, being in front of my first real big crowd. I mean, I had DJ high school
Yeah.
dances and stuff like that, but when I worked in radio, I was able to work in Spanish radio. And I don't know if you remember the Universal Amphitheater, which is now the Harry Potter ride at Universal Studios. We did a big,
Yep.
radio station concert. And so I was the opening act, and I was spinning for 6,700 people, and it was just like, boom! You hear that audience scream when you play
Yeah,
the right
that
song.
roar of the audience.
Yeah,
I know it well.
it's a huge rush, man. It's the next best thing to being a singer, performer. It's like, I mean, you're not really singing, but you're just playing other people's hits, and people are reacting to you as to how you're playing it. It's a freaking rush, man.
100%. Yeah, I hear you, man. It's the next best thing to being that performer. But the funny thing is, I guess in this day and age, right now, DJs are our own acts or our own
Yeah,
performers now.
yeah.
Like there's a lot of
It
DJs that produce their own music, a lot of DJs that are out there touring. And yeah, man, they're the actual main performance or main act at some of these concerts or these festivals.
Yeah, yeah. It's wild to think that, like when we got started, we were lucky to get a couple of $100, to spin,
Yeah.
a full night. And now you got DJs making thousands, to do a 1 or 2 hour set, it's like, dang, man, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, to add to your point, man, like, yeah, when we were starting, it was just a hobby. It was
Yeah.
just for fun. It was a bunch of DJ crews getting together. But now, in this time, in this present day, of course, pre-COVID, you had like DJs headlining Vegas,
Yeah.
headlining the biggest clubs in Vegas.
Yeah.
You had DJs headlining the biggest festivals. You have DJs touring, doing their actual own tour around the country or even around the world.
Yeah.
And it's very common now.
Oh
And
yeah.
DJ
You
has
are
now
one of those
become an
DJs
artist and
that
become an
tours
act.
now, right? You're out there doing your thing because you've been around the world. I mean, you've been to a place where I would love to visit. It's on my bucket list, which is Sri Lanka. And the
Oh,
reason why I discovered Sri Lanka was back in the 80s. As you can see here, I'm a big Depeche Mode fan. That was my all-time
yeah.
favorite band, followed by U2. My third favorite band was Duran
Uh-huh.
Duran. I used to love their freaking videos in the 80s. And they filmed, I think it was Save a Prayer in Sri Lanka. And I just freaking loved the scenery. I
Wow.
thought it was so freaking beautiful. And I always wanted to be there. And then to find out that you actually spun in Sri Lanka, right?
I've DJ'd over there, yes.
How cool is that? How did that come about? How did that gig get that? How did you get that
So,
gig?
a friend of mine that grew up here in California, he ended up, long story short, he ended up becoming one of the Department of Tourism people over there in Sri Lanka. And they came up with a concept of doing a big concert or big tour through Sri Lanka. And so part of that was he brought in acts, he brought in performers, and then me being his homie, he flew me out there to perform. But me and myself and my man Taquan, my MC, we were able to go out there as a group to DJ, not only DJ in between the groups, but we also performed our own music as well. And it was a hell of an experience, man.
Wow.
And to add to that, man, like I wanted to, well, when we were there in Sri Lanka, one of these guys that were owners of resorts over at the Maldives, he happened to be at the show that we were performing at, and he was like, "Please come to my resort. You guys can perform over there. I'll take care of you. Extra this, extra that. I got you." But
Nice.
it was just a crazy time in my life where I was just married. I just had a kid. I couldn't leave my
Wow.
wife for another week and a half, 2 weeks to be gone in another country again.
Right.
Moving from Sri Lanka. I could have easily taken that gig, but yeah, I wish I would have taken him up on that experience because I haven't been back since. So,
Wow.
all
But
good though. But yeah, Sri
yeah,
Lanka was a heck of an experience. It was
I could just
super.
imagine, man. Yeah, I mean, I had the privilege of doing some traveling through Latin America, and that's been pretty cool. But I mean, I got to tell you, man, that some of the places you've been to, Dubai, like I said, Sri Lanka, China, you've been to Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, you've done your traveling, and you were one of the original world famous beat junkies as well, right?
Yes, from the very beginning when the crew formed. Yes, I was one of the original members. Um, Man, it just started as a crew of homies. Again, just friends coming together. We all loved music. We all loved hip hop. We loved the art of turntablism, and just the art form of DJing. Period. And that natural bond brought us all together, and kept us together all these years. So yeah,
That is really
it's
cool.
been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have, quite a history behind you. I mean, I was reading up on you, and you've just done so many things, and in reality, in such little time. Now, you mentioned that you were performing your own tracks. At what age, and when did you start getting into producing your original music?
Well, okay, let me clarify that.
Mhm.
I never produced my own tracks, but I was part of a group called Soul Elevation with my man Taquan. And although I didn't produce the actual tracks, I was the one coordinating because I knew a lot of producers, I knew a lot of DJs.
Okay.
I was the one getting the beats and getting everybody and putting together with my MC and with musicians and and we would go and produce these tracks in a studio and all of that. But I wasn't the one personally into music production.
Got it. Got it.
My
Got it.
forte was, and even my forte today is still just bringing people together and making cool things happen.
So you're more of the network lead, right? You're kind of like the guy that brings everybody together and make it all happen.
I guess you could call that. I guess you could call it that, man. But yeah, I was just more of that connector. I would bring everyone together, and so yeah, I was never the person that was producing the tracks, but I guess I was I was the producer in the fact that I brought everybody together to
Right.
form to form that Voltron and make music and
That's cool.
make some cool projects happen.
Very cool. And you also have a long history in radio as well. You've been on, some of Los Angeles' top stations, Power 106, K-Day, The Beat. What was your
Yes.
first radio gig and how did you get into it?
Well, my very first radio gig was with the Beat Junkies, and it was on public radio. It was on 93.3 or something like that. It was just a small little public radio station where you actually had to buy your time so that you could play. So we pooled all our money together as the Junkies, and we had our show called the Beat Junkie Hour, and it was on KWIZ 93.3 or something like that. And it was out of Pasadena, and we would just come together every Sunday night, rock that show, and that was our first radio experience. But the way I got into radio was all of us as the Beat Junkies, we were part of a record pool called Ghetto Baby Record Pool, which was owned by the Baker Boys' older brother, Frank V. Rest in peace. Frank V had that record pool, and he would run it out of Nick V's, I guess you could call it swimming pool house or whatever, the house. He had a back house right next to the swimming pool and pretty much ran the record pool out of that. And
That's cool.
all of us as the Beat Junkies, we would go there to these weekly meetings. We'd have these meetings. You meet up with record reps, and then they give you your records, and then off you go. And of course, you fill out your reports. You gotta talk about what you liked about the record, this record, your feedback, if you liked it, you didn't like it, all of that. So being part of Ghetto Baby, of course, again, you're networking with a whole bunch of elite DJs that were part of this record pool. And one of the guys that was on this record pool was a guy named Julio G. Julio G, one of the original K-Day mix masters that I was talking about earlier. One of the guys I would listen to when I was coming up as a DJ. And so I met Julio, and we got to build. And then I invited him to some of the clubs that we were doing at the time, which were Legend Entertainment parties. And so like Julio came out, and he was just shocked that he saw like 800, 1,000 Filipino kids, Asian kids rocking to Gangstar, to Eric B. Rakim, or to, like just hip hop.
Hip hop in general, yeah.
His thinking was like, oh, Asians love house music or Asians love pop music. But for him to see Asians and Filipinos rocking to hip hop and then cutting, scratching, he saw the actual Beat Junkies doing our thing at these nightclubs too. He was just blown away. So this was right about the time Easy had passed. And so Julio G was just taking over Easy's time slot on Saturday nights. It used to be the Ruthless Radio show on 92.3 The Beat. And Julio taking over, he basically said, okay, I'm going to open it up to DJs around LA and bring in some of these up-and-coming DJs. So first people he brought in was the Beat Junkies. So myself, Melody, Rhetmatic, my sister DJ Symphony.
Nice.
We were some of his first guests. And that opened up the door for us to make it on 92.3 The Beat. That opened up the door for us to get into radio, period. So much love and much respect to Julio G.
Yeah, Julio G is definitely a force to be reckoned with, because he was an originator doing stuff that, we all just were mesmerized with. It's like you were talking about, man. Joe Cooley and doing his things. I mean, you would hear him do things on air, and I remember, being a kid and just saying, how the heck did he do that? It's like just all these tricks and stuff, and it was just freaking awesome, man.
Yeah, so much respect to Tony G, Julio G, the K-Day Mix Masters. Man, they paved the way in Los Angeles for guys like the Beat Junkies. They paved the way for future generations of DJs to
Yeah.
come around. So I mean, those guys are the West Coast pioneers that put it down for DJs here on the West Coast, man.
So,
So
who
yeah,
would you
man.
say was your greatest influence when you first got started? I mean, you mentioned a flurry of names of DJs, but who would you say that was your go-to guy to say, "This is the guy that I gotta outdo"?
Well, okay, so in the early stages, yeah, Tony G, Julio G, and Kate and Joe Cooley. Those three were like my biggest influences because those were the guys that I would listen on 1580 KD, and then those were the guys that I experienced seeing at my first dance. And then as I got more into DJing, then guys that were actually that became my beat junkie brothers, like DJ Curse, like DJ Repmatic, like those guys were heavy influences on me because I would get their mixtapes. Mixtapes would get pass around, and I would get a hold of them, and then just be mesmerized by this cutting, the scratching, all the DJing, the turntablism that they were doing on these mixtapes. And so when I finally met them, we clicked, and we all became a crew. But yeah, those were like my next influences. And then of course you move on later as you keep going,
Right.
like the Cuberts, the Mixmaster Mikes, and of course the Cash Moneys, Jazzy Jeffs, a whole bunch of DJs, man. All these pioneers were big influences on me in the very beginning.
That is really cool. Out of all the clubs you've spun at around the world, which is the one that you would say is the most memorable, the one that you had the most fun at, that you can just say, man, that place was freaking just insane?
Dang. That's a hard question to answer because I've been to a lot of the clubs around the world that has
Yeah.
made me feel like that. So,
Right.
I mean, just to name off my very first time in the Philippines, they made me feel like a rock star, man. Like here I am, just a dude on radio, and I was coming into the Philippines for the very first time, and anything I played, they were just the crowd was roaring like as if I
Wow.
was Jay-Z or something like that. But and then another club, something along those same lines is in Japan. My first time in Japan, and I rocked some of those clubs over there. They made me feel like that in Shibuya. They made me feel like that in Tokyo. They made me feel like that in Yokohama, in the different cities. And then
Nice.
likewise, when I was in Australia, I did a tour over there. Every club made me feel like that. So it's hard to pinpoint any one spot. But yeah, I mean, I think every experience that I have in a lot of these different countries, as well as a lot of spots around the U.S., it's just been amazing. It's been amazing
That's
because
really
they
cool.
always showed so much love every time I rocked.
Well, I mean, you definitely have, like I said from the beginning, you got a talent, and you definitely know how to work it correctly to get the crowds into a frenzy. Out of all those places, which was the venue that had the most attended? What was the biggest audience you ever spun for?
Okay, so as far as biggest audience I've spun for live, it has to be Rock the Bells. So I was the resident DJ of Rock the Bells, and the biggest Rock the Bells to date was when they had the Rage Against the Machine reunion.
Ooh,
And so the Rage Against the Machine reunion, they were already broken up for a good 10 years.
yeah.
And Chang, the leader of Rock the Bells, he finally got them to agree to come together. And then he called this one the greatest day of hip hop because he had not only Rage Against the Machine coming together, but then he had all the biggest hip hop groups of all time coming together and rocking. So Most Def Talib, he had EPMD, you had like Tribe
Wow.
Called Quest, you had EPMD, just a whole bunch of groups. Everyone all the way up to KRS-One. Everyone performed
Gosh.
on this bill, and yeah, that concert they clocked in over 67,000 people at this spot. So it was amazing,
That's huge.
amazing.
That's huge.
And this was predating any of the big festivals that are out there, where a lot of these
Right.
festivals are hundreds of thousands of people, but this is predating all those times. So yeah, man, this was huge. It was
That's
really
wild.
huge.
So let's come up to today. Obviously, everybody's been impacted by what's going on around us with coronavirus and everything, and we're
Yes.
all locked in and stuff. How has this situation sparked your creativity, as far as, the fact that we're locked in, we're not doing events, we're not at clubs, we're not doing mobiling or anything like that? Has this helped your creativity in a sense?
Yeah, well, let me just build up to that. Like I think, like all of us, we went into this whole pandemic just very uncertain of what was going to happen.
All right.
We didn't know what was, when we were going to go back to be able to do our jobs, which we still haven't gone back, and it's almost a year later now.
Yeah.
Um, all our gigs were canceling left and right or being pushed. You had people that you did book for those gigs asking for deposits back and canceling those events. And then of course, you don't have the money that, like, it was just a big mess. It was just
Yeah.
one big mess of uncertainty, of just like all of these things just made me kind of go into like a mini depression type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sitting around the house and unsure of everything, uncertain about everything, not knowing the future, and just really down on everything. And then being able to not be able to go out, not being able to go see people, not even going to see your friends or any of that. We were just stuck. And so, yeah, I had a good few weeks of that. But then my wife, my kids, they helped me snap out of that. And then um, a lot of prayer, a lot of prayer.
Amen.
That all sparked, that helped spark me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, okay, we're in this situation. What can I do? I just kept asking myself, what can I do? And then my whole crew, both the Junkies and Snapback, we were all asking the same question: what can we do in this time? And then so, yeah, it definitely sparked our creativity, because then we had to work with what we had, and we had to be able to just creatively do what we love. Not live for people, but we had to creatively do it over the internet.
Yeah.
And so live streaming, that was something that's always been around, but a lot of DJs, none of the DJ community really took it on full on. And so, yeah, this pandemic kind of forced us into a whole new thing, which is live streaming.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that once we all got the ball rolling in live streaming, that's where creative juices just started flowing, and we started making things happen right away.
It's interesting how it all started, because just like you, I was like down. I was like, man, because I have my company, Elite DJs, and event planning, and all my events cancel or postpone, and I'm like, man, what the heck is going on here? And I had thought about doing a podcast. I just didn't know what. I wasn't sure,
Right.
What I was going to do. And then I started saying to myself, well, I know a lot of DJs, and I know a lot of real famous and popular DJs. I should just reach out to them and just talk to them. So that started up. My wife also was the one that said, you should start doing, live streaming on Facebook. She goes, I was more known for the Latin rock, the Spanish rock. And she says,
Right.
I think a lot of people would really enjoy it. And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to be known as the rock DJ anymore and stuff. And then at that time, the quality that I was hearing, the audio and stuff, and the video was just like, I was like, I don't want to sound like that, until
terrible.
my buddy Freddie Morales, I hear him one night, he's on. I said, oh, let me see what he's spinning, because he always is into this really cool electro and trance music and stuff.
Yeah.
And I started listening. The quality is exceptional. His mic is exceptional. And I'm all, bud, please call me as soon as you get a chance. I'm like, what are you running? How are you doing this? Oh, I got this little iRig and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Then another friend of mine turns me on to OBS and stuff. And I'm all like, here we go. Now it's on. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how DJs, we just kind of took off with it, man. And now it's like exceptional. You just see these guys like yourself, your sets when you're doing your streams. It's just freaking awesome, man. The effects and, visuals, and you're doing your stuff, and you're scratching, and it's really cool how it's evolved so quickly. So
Appreciate
my question
that, bro.
to you on this is, how do you see it moving forward once we get out of the pandemic? Do you think that this is going to go to another level beyond just what we're doing now?
Um, I believe so, man. I think we are just at the start of something big. You know what I mean? Like I think live streaming is just in its infancy, at least in the DJ community.
Right.
And I think we have a long ways to go to do this. And yeah, I think even when the pandemic it passes and we're able to get back into doing in real life events, yeah, man, I think live streaming is here, and I think live streaming is only gonna grow because yeah, man, it's just dope. Live streaming is dope. You were explaining how the quality and all of that sucked in the very beginning. Yeah, because we were not connected. We're just going right off of our phone.
Right.
The very beginning when we're talking about the Instagram days and the Facebook days, and I'm saying the very beginning. That's in like February, March,
Right.
April of this year when we didn't know any better, right?
Yep,
And then we learn about Twitch. We learn about what the gamers were doing. We learn about like this whole other side of things. And we were even reluctant to get onto Twitch because we were so comfortable with Instagram. But, thank the RIAA and thank Instagram for always cutting us off because they forced us to get off that channel and go over to the way better channel, which is Twitch.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, I think exactly what you're saying. No, we're right at the cusp of just creating quality content. We're at the cusp of making quality programming that people would love to see. And, much like gamers, I mean, it took years and years and years for gamers to get where they're at. And now you see gamers that have thousands, hundreds of thousands. I even saw a gamer yesterday just talking to 2 million people about Fortnite. Just talking.
How crazy is that, man?
Blows my mind, man. So if people can play games and people can talk about video games and have thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even 2 million people watching, why wouldn't they want to see like the dopest DJs in the world rocking the same way?
Exactly.
I think we're just in the beginning stages. We're super happy with 50 people, 100 people in our room. And again, the gamers who are years ahead of us, man, they have thousands and hundreds of thousands and 2 million people.
Imagine that.
Watching them. So I think the potential of growth is there. It's just up to us to keep it going and up to us to keep the creative juices going and keep on building, because I don't think we don't have nowhere near the amount of people watching on as the gamers do. The gamers have hundreds of millions of people watching on that side. On the music side, I believe there's only a few million that are registered watching the music side. So much growth, so much.
And there's a lot of potential
ahead of us.
It's funny because I asked Richard Vision the same question of, what was his biggest audience that he ever performed for? And he said, you know what? I got to be honest with you. He says, I've performed at a lot of different events, festivals, huge concerts. He says, but my biggest audience was when I did my first live stream with DJ Irene. He said that was the biggest audience he had reached ever in all his, career.
Wow.
So that says something, I mean, as to where it's going. I mean, and the thing is that there's a lot of DJs out there, untapped talent that are just starting to emerge, that are coming up with really cool stuff. I mean, technology today has helped us out a lot. I mean, just as well as I do that back in the day, having to carry out these big ass speakers and, 4 to 5, 6 crates filled with records, that was a pain in the ass, man. But now with technology,
that's why we had big DJ crews, because you had to have like guys, you had to have multiple trucks, and you had to have the crew to be able to wheel out all this equipment, the trussing, the lighting, just everything, the bass bins, the speakers, all of that, man. But yeah, man, we're in this day and age where it's so much easier to do things. And then again, we're now tapping into live streaming, which is we have our own TV shows or our own, where we're building our own audience to rock with us on a daily basis or whatever you want to rock. But yeah, I think with live streaming, we're all on an equal playing field. It doesn't matter if you've been DJing for 2 years or you've been DJing for 15, 20 years.
Hmm.
We're all even because we're all starting at zero. We're all building our audiences at zero. It's crazy to think like a girl DJ that's been rocking for a few years. She's outdoing numbers of someone watching DJ Craze or
Right.
watching any of us Beat Junkies or any of that stuff. Like it doesn't matter. It's
Yeah.
all about the person, the personality, the way they interact with their people. It's all a level playing field. So that's what's dope about this whole live streaming thing too.
Cool. So we're coming up to the end, but before we head out, I want to ask you about Snapback and Snapback Live. Why don't you tell us a little
Okay.
bit about that and what this is all about?
Well, so Snapback Live is a bunch of DJs. We're all one crew, and this crew, we were always doing live events, and it was a weekly club that we'd call Snapback, and we were doing it out of North Hollywood, we were doing it out of Long Beach, and then Los Angeles, and then most recently Las Vegas.
Nice.
So our Snapback lives, we would do it all these locations, and then it was pretty much a classic hip hop, R&B, just classic music, anything old school. Um, that's what we would rock. And we started this club about 8 years ago, 7 years ago. And it was at a time when EDM was at its height. So
Mm.
no matter what club you were rocking, EDM always had to be played. So it was us that came up, like we said, we wanted to do a club where we can play all the music that we love, all the music that we grew up to, all the music that made us feel good. So that's what brought up Snapback. And again, they were just physical clubs. And then we we were doing all of this. We were about hitting our 8th year in doing these clubs, and then the pandemic hit. And then so us as Snapback, we were again asking the question, what do we do as a crew? We saw that D Nice was starting to do his thing, and we were already doing our live streams as Snapback at that time. But then that's when we said, okay, let's do it daily. Let's call our show Lunch Tables, as in lunch turntables,
Right.
lunchtime. And then yeah, so we branded the event, we branded the channel, and we built it. And then of course, just like we did at all our live events, we'd have all our homies play as well as up and coming DJs, and then the biggest DJs in the game as well. So it's been a fun ride, man. Snapback is
That's
now
cool.
has been growing. We've also been able to do some big, huge fundraisers. So things
Nice.
like No Kid Hungry, or um, we've been able to raise in upwards of like $30,000 for
Wow,
these
that's
organizations in
great.
just doing these live streams in
That is
conjunction with
awesome.
organizations. So, yeah, I mean, Snapback Live started as an event company doing live events, but now we are a full blown event and live streaming company as well. So
That's
it's been
good,
dope.
man. Well, congratulations on that. I love the fact that you guys are giving back to the community, which in reality, has given to all of us, throughout our DJ careers, and allowing us to be able to come out and, spin at clubs and spinning at, events and stuff like that. It's cool to give back, especially right now, the way things are and the uncertainty of so many things, people losing jobs and unfortunately so many losing their lives and stuff. And, to be able to give back like that is really huge. I mean, not only are you entertaining, but you're also, giving back monetarily, which is huge, man. And that my hats off to you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Yeah. Well, that was part of our motivation was like in this pandemic, we wanted to not only entertain because we were entertaining on a daily basis, but we also wanted to give back. We wanted to make a difference, and we wanted to make a positive impact. Period. So,
Very
so
cool.
yeah. Not only were we live streaming, but we're also raising those funds and giving it to worthy causes that needed the help. And then we've actually got something in the works again in this next coming month. So you'll be hearing about it. But yeah, that's Snapback in a nutshell. We're just trying to be there for the people, but also give back to the people.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, listen, brother, I want to thank you for your time and sharing your story with us, man. It's a real pleasure. I mean, you and I have never really met except through, social media. And I got to tell you, your story is definitely one of, of influence for others. You know what I mean? I think that a lot of people are going to really enjoy your talent and of course your story, man. So thank you very much for taking the time, man. I appreciate
Bro,
you.
I love what you're doing with the podcast. Continue what you're doing. I love how this pandemic sparked it for you, so that you started this, and you're bringing dope DJs onto your stream and then sharing these stories and knowledge with the world. So hats to you too, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you. And of course, you that's watching, we're going to have all of DJ Icy Ice's links right here in the description. And of course, if you like this, please make sure to hit that like. Always subscribe and click the bell button so that you get notified when we have another DJ. And I do want to let you know that you can now catch this podcast on Spotify and Google Podcasts. So make sure you look it up. Just look up DJ to DJ with Fernando G, and you'll be seeing all the episodes popping up there. So thanks again, brother. I really appreciate you. Please stay safe, and we will definitely be in touch, man.
Stay safe, Fernando G. Appreciate you guys. Thank you. One love.